Dr. Amara Jackson freezes as the TSA agent loudly ridicules her traditional African attire, calling it costume party leftovers. Her husband, Dr. Malik Jackson, squeezes her hand as the crowd stares. Little does this agent know that in 24 hours, the Jacksons will stand before the King of Sweden, accepting the Nobel Prize in Medicine for their groundbreaking sickle cell treatment that will save millions of lives. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination at an airport, and subscribe to follow this journey of brilliance prevailing against prejudice. Now, let's rewind to see how this moment came to be. The evening sky cast a golden glow through the windows of the Jacksons' modest suburban Atlanta home as Amara carefully folded the vibrant Kent cloth garments into their suitcase. Each pattern told a story, stories their ancestors couldn't have imagined would one day be displayed on the world's most prestigious scientific stage. Do you think we're making the right choice? Amara asked, running her fingers along the intricate handwoven patterns. Wearing these instead of Western formal wear? Malik looked up from his laptop where he had been reviewing his acceptance speech notes. His eyes softened as they fell on his wife of 22 years, his research partner, his intellectual equal in every way. Our discovery will save millions of lives affected by sickle cell disease, most of them black. We earned this recognition not despite who we are, but because of who we are. Our heritage isn't something to hide, it's part of what brought us here. Their journey to this moment had been anything but straightforward. Both children of sharecroppers in rural Georgia, they had defied every statistic, every barrier placed before bright black minds in America. Amara still remembered the high school guidance counselor who suggested she aim more realistically than medical school. Malik recalled the college professor who accused him of plagiarism because his genetics paper was too sophisticated to have been written by him. The phone rang, interrupting their reminiscing. The caller ID showed an international number. Dr. Jackson speaking, Amara answered, putting the call on speaker. Dr. Jackson, this is Ingrid Bergstrom from the Nobel Committee. I'm calling to confirm your arrival details for tomorrow and to express again how honored we are to have you both as our laureates this year. The Swedish accent came through clearly. Your achievement as the first Black American couple to jointly win the prize has generated tremendous excitement here in Stockholm. After confirming details and ending the call, Amara sat heavily on the edge of the bed. I still can't believe this is happening. Malik joined her, taking her hand. 20 years of research. 37 rejection letters from medical journals. Countless grant applications denied. Labs that wouldn't hire us. And now the world can't deny the truth of what we've done, Amara finished. She rose and walked to their closet, pulling out a garment wrapped carefully in protective cloth. As she unfolded it, the rich colors and patterns seemed to bring the room to life. This was her grandmother's handiwork, sent specially from Ghana when news of their Nobel Prize broke. Grandma Nana said wearing this would honor all those who came before us, who never got their chance to shine, Amara whispered, holding the fabric against her body. Malik nodded, remembering his own grandfather who had died from complications of sickle cell trait, never knowing his grandson would discover the key to preventing such suffering. When they see us on that stage, he said softly, they'll see not just two scientists, but generations of brilliance that was systematically suppressed. Amara carefully repacked the ceremonial clothes. Her hands trembled slightly as anxiety crept in. Not about the prestigious ceremony awaiting them, but about the journey to get there. She had endured too many random airport screenings, too many suspicious glances and intrusive questions from security personnel, too many incidents of being the only passenger asked to open her bags for additional inspection. You're thinking about the airport, aren't you? Malik asked, reading her expression as only someone who had shared both her professional and personal journey could. Last time we flew to the medical conference in Paris, that was different, he interjected. We weren't Nobel laureates then. You think that matters to TSA agents? She challenged gently. When has a degree or title ever protected us from being seen as suspicious first, human second? Malik had no answer because they both knew the truth. Their credentials, dual MDs with PhDs, department chairs at their university, now Nobel Prize winners, had never shielded them from the everyday indignities of being black in America. As they finished packing, Malik paused to look at a framed photo on their dresser. It showed them as young researchers, working late in a lab they had pieced together with second-hand equipment and sheer determination. That was the night they first conceptualized the genetic therapy that would eventually revolutionize treatment for sickle cell disease. Remember what Dr. Ellington told us that night we applied for the initial research grant? Malik asked. Amara nodded, the memory still sharp despite the 15 years that had passed. He said we were wasting our talents focusing on minority diseases when we could be researching something more universally relevant. And now our work will save lives across Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and right here in America. Malik's voice swelled with quiet pride. 4 million people worldwide with a chance at life without pain, all because we didn't listen to him. As they prepared for bed, knowing the next day would change their lives forever, Amara whispered, "Whatever happens tomorrow, promise me we'll remain true to ourselves. No matter how they treat us, no matter what they say." "I promise," Malik replied, kissing her forehead gently. "They can take our dignity, but they can't take our achievement. Not anymore." Neither could have predicted just how much that promise would be tested in the hours to come. The Atlanta International Airport buzzed with early morning travelers as the Jacksons approached the security checkpoint. Amara felt the familiar weight of eyes tracking their movement, a sensation so common she had developed a sixth sense for it. Their carry-on luggage contained their ceremonial attire, too precious to risk in checked baggage. "ID and boarding passes, please," the first TSA agent said flatly, barely looking up as she checked their documents against the flight manifest. This initial interaction went smoothly, almost surprisingly so. The conveyor belt carried their shoes, laptops, and a special case containing their formal wear toward the X-ray machine. Malik and Amara stepped through the body scanner one after another, following protocol as they had dozens of times before. That's when they met Russell Whitmore, a balding TSA agent with a perpetual scowl etched into his face. He stood examining the X-ray images with unusual intensity before pointing to the screen. "What's this?" he asked loudly, gesturing toward their carry-on with the traditional clothing. "Those are our formal clothes for an event in Stockholm," Malik explained calmly. Russell snorted. "Some kind of costume party?" "No, sir. Traditional African formal attire," Amara corrected, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the knot forming in her stomach. The agent called over a colleague, not bothering to lower his voice. "Hey, Carl, come look at this. They're bringing Halloween early to Sweden." Several nearby passengers turned to stare. A few had already pulled out their phones, sensing the confrontation brewing. Amara noticed a young white woman begin recording discreetly. "We need to inspect these items," Russell announced, pulling on gloves with theatrical flourish. He withdrew the delicate hand-woven garments with 2 fingers, as if they might be contaminated. "What are these strange patterns supposed to be? Gang symbols?" Malik's jaw tightened. "That's Kent cloth, a traditional Ghanaian textile. Those patterns represent wisdom and history." "Sure they do," Russell smirked, dropping the garment carelessly onto the inspection table. "And I suppose this headdress isn't hiding anything either." As Russell continued his inspection, becoming increasingly theatrical for his growing audience, Amara felt herself transported back to the American Medical Association conference 3 years earlier. They had presented their preliminary research findings to a room of skeptical colleagues. The panel moderator had introduced every presenter with their full credentials. Except the Jacksons, whom he referred to merely as Amara and Malik. When questioned afterward, he claimed it was an innocent oversight, but the message was clear: no matter their accomplishments, they would always be marked as outsiders. "I'm going to need a supervisor," Malik finally stated, his patience wearing thin. Russell shrugged and called over his radio. Supervisor to Lane 5. Got some travelers with an attitude problem. The supervisor, who arrived minutes later, Diana Hayes, carried herself with bureaucratic efficiency. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her skin. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked, directing her question solely to Russell despite Malik being the one who had requested her presence. "These folks got upset when I was just doing my standard inspection of some unusual items," Russell reported. "That's not accurate," Amara interjected. "Your agent has been deliberately disrespectful, making racist comments about our traditional clothing and handling culturally significant items with contempt." Diana's expression hardened. "Sir, ma'am, TSA has protocols in place to ensure everyone's safety. If you continue to disrupt the screening process, we may need to take additional measures." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Some passengers expressed impatience at the delay, others watched with uncomfortable fascination. A few nodded in sympathy with the Jacksons. "We've complied with every regulation," Malik stated firmly. "We're simply asking to be treated with basic dignity." "I understand you're upset," Diana said in a tone that suggested she understood nothing of the sort, "but there's no need to make this about race." The words hung in the air like a slap. It was the familiar dismissal they had encountered throughout their careers. The suggestion that identifying discrimination was somehow worse than experiencing it. As Diana and Russell continued their thorough inspection, a young black female TSA agent named Zoe Washington approached from another lane. She couldn't intervene directly, but she caught Amara's eye with a look of silent apology before whispering, "I'll try to help expedite this." "I'm so sorry." The clock was ticking. Their flight was scheduled to depart in 90 minutes, and they had already spent 30 at this checkpoint alone. "We have an important international flight," Malik explained, struggling to maintain his composure. "At this rate, we'll miss our connection in New York." "Should have thought about that before bringing suspicious items and creating a scene," Russell replied smugly. "Now we'll need to conduct additional screening." "On what grounds?" Malik challenged, his academic precision cutting through the pretense. "Random selection," Diana answered smoothly, though nothing about this situation was random. They were directed to a separate area where their remaining bags were emptied completely. Every toiletry bottle opened and tested. Every piece of clothing unfolded and examined. All while Russell continued making comments just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Probably carrying cod or something. These people always try to bring their illegal substances." Zoe managed to speed up parts of the process when the others weren't looking, quickly verifying items and returning them to the Jacksons' bags. "My brother has sickle cell," she whispered during one such moment. "Thank you for your work." The Jacksons exchanged a surprised glance. Their research was well known in medical circles but not typically recognized by the general public. With just 20 minutes until boarding, Diana finally declared the inspection complete. As the Jacksons hurried to repack their belongings, a security officer approached. "We've received reports of a disturbance," he stated flatly. "I need to remind you that creating a disruption in an airport is a federal offense. If you continue to cause problems, you may be prevented from boarding your flight." Malik stood to his full height, his voice low but firm. "The only disruption here has been the unprofessional conduct of your TSA agents. We've documented this interaction and will be filing a formal complaint." The security officer's hand shifted subtly toward his weapon, a gesture so small yet so telling that Amara felt her heart race. She placed a gentle hand on Malik's arm. "We understand," she said carefully. "We'll be on our way now." As they hurried toward their gate, the weight of what had just happened settled on their shoulders. In less than 24 hours, they would accept humanity's highest scientific honor for work that would save countless lives, yet here, in their home country, they had been treated as criminals simply for existing in their skin. The cabin of the transatlantic flight hummed with the white noise of air circulation and muffled conversations. Amara and Malik settled into their business class seats, a luxury they had splurged on for this once-in-a-lifetime journey. Yet even here, the ripple effects of the airport confrontation followed them. Several passengers who had witnessed the TSA incident boarded the same flight, their curious glances and whispers making it clear the Jacksons remained a topic of discussion. As Amara stowed her bag beneath the seat, she noticed a man 3 rows ahead pointing in their direction while whispering to his seatmate. "Pretend you don't notice," Malik murmured, squeezing her hand. A flight attendant approached, her professional smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Can I get you anything before takeoff?" "Water, please," Amara requested. "And we pre-ordered vegetarian meals." The attendant nodded curtly and moved on without writing anything down. When she returned with drinks for their section, she served everyone but seemed to miss the Jacksons until Malik politely flagged her down. "Oh, I apologize," she said without conviction. "Must have overlooked you." As the plane reached cruising altitude, Amara closed her eyes, trying to center herself, but her heart was racing. The recycled air felt suddenly thin, insufficient. Her breathing became shallow and rapid. "Amara?" Malik's voice sounded distant. "Amara, look at me." She was back in her undergraduate biology lab, the only black student, when the professor had accused her of cheating because her experiment yielded perfect results. She was at their first apartment, being questioned by police because a neighbor reported suspicious individuals moving in. She was at their daughter's elementary school, being mistaken for the janitor rather than a parent during a teacher conference. "I can't," she whispered, her chest tightening. "I can't breathe." Malik recognized the panic attack immediately. He had witnessed several over their years together, each triggered by particularly traumatic experiences of discrimination. He guided her through the breathing exercises their therapist had recommended, speaking in low, soothing tones. "4 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts out," he instructed gently. "That's it. You're safe. I'm here." Gradually, her breathing steadied. When she finally opened her eyes, they were damp with tears of frustration and exhaustion. "Why today of all days?" she whispered. "Why couldn't we just have this one moment of joy without being reminded of our place?" Malik had no answer that could heal this particular wound. Instead, he reached into his carry-on and pulled out a worn leather journal, the lab notebook where they had first documented their breakthrough discovery 7 years ago. "Remember this day?" he asked, opening to a page filled with their excited scribbles and chemical diagrams. Amara's fingers traced the notation in her handwriting, CRISPR modification successful in isolating the HBB gene mutation. Potential for complete sickle cell reversal without side effects. That moment in their cramped university lab had changed everything. After years of research, failed experiments, and skepticism from colleagues, they had finally developed a genetic therapy that could modify the gene responsible for sickle cell disease, a condition that predominantly affected people of African descent and had been historically underfunded and understudied. "We knew it worked before the tests even confirmed it," Amara recalled, a small smile breaking through her distress. "It was like every cell in my body recognized we'd found the answer. And then we couldn't get anyone to take us seriously," Malik added. 37 medical journals rejected our paper. Insufficient evidence, methodology concerns, limited clinical significance, Amara recited the rejection reasons from memory. Until Dr. Banerjee finally gave us a chance at the International Journal of Hematology. As they reminisced, an elderly man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses approached from across the aisle. His accent was distinctly Swedish as he introduced himself. "Pardon the intrusion. I couldn't help overhearing, are you Doctors Amara and Malik Jackson?" He smiled warmly at their surprised expressions. "I'm Dr. Lars Svensson from the Karolinska Institute. I reviewed your research for the Nobel Committee." The conversation that followed provided a healing counterpoint to their earlier experience. Dar. Svensson spoke knowledgeably about the global impact of their work, especially in regions with high sickle cell prevalence. "Your therapy will save over 4 million lives globally," he noted. "Particularly in West Africa, the Middle East, and among African Americans. Yet I understand your path to this discovery was not easy. Malik exchanged a glance with Amara before responding. The American medical establishment has historical blind spots when it comes to conditions primarily affecting non-white populations. Historical and current, Amara added quietly. Our initial research proposals were rejected 17 times. One reviewer explicitly questioned why we were focusing on a niche population concern instead of more universal health issues. Dr. Svensson shook his head. Shameful. Though sadly not surprising. The history of medicine is filled with such biases. He lowered his voice confidentially. Between colleagues, I should tell you your selection was not unanimous. Several committee members questioned whether your work was truly transformative enough compared to research on conditions affecting, shall we say, more privileged populations. The revelation wasn't shocking, yet it still stung. Even at the pinnacle of scientific recognition, their achievement had been questioned in ways their white colleagues' work never would be. Their conversation was interrupted by a news alert on the in-flight entertainment system. The screen showed international coverage of Nobel Prize winners, with the Jacksons featured prominently in European media. However, the American networks had relegated their historic achievement to brief mentions, focusing instead on a celebrity scandal and political infighting. As they continued chatting with Dr. Svensson, Malik's phone buzzed with a notification. Despite the airplane mode, the aircraft's Wi-Fi had delivered a message from their daughter Zuri, a sophomore at Howard University. Mom, Dad, you're trending. Hashtag TSA racism, hashtag Nobel laureates mocked. Attached was a link to a social media post containing video of their airport confrontation, already viewed over 200,000 times. The comments section was a battlefield of support and vitriol. This is what we wanted to avoid, Amara murmured, showing Malik the screen. Perhaps, he replied thoughtfully, but maybe it needed to be seen. As the flight continued across the Atlantic, the Jacksons alternated between preparation for their Nobel lectures and processing the complex emotions of the day. Their achievement represented the pinnacle of scientific recognition. Yet they couldn't escape the reality that in their home country, their skin color still defined how the world treated them, regardless of the letters after their names or the lives their work would save. The flight attendant returned during meal service. The vegetarian meals they had requested were, unfortunately, unavailable. Instead, they were offered chicken or nothing. Dr. Svensson, who had also requested vegetarian, received his special meal without issue. Some battles weren't worth fighting. They accepted the chicken and ate in silence. The plane touched down at Stockholm Arlanda Airport under a crisp December sky. As the Jacksons prepared to disembark, the same flight attendant who had forgotten their meal requests now approached with an overly bright smile. Dr. and Dr. Jackson. The crew has been notified that you'll be met at the gate. If you could wait until other passengers have deplaned, your escort is standing by. Malik and Amara exchanged puzzled glances. They expected to be met by Nobel Committee representatives, but not with special gate service. When they finally stepped into the terminal, the contrast with their Atlanta departure couldn't have been more stark. A small delegation waited, including 2 officials in formal attire, a woman holding a bouquet of flowers, and several photographers whose cameras began clicking immediately. Dr. Amara Jackson, Dr. Malik Jackson, a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard, stepped forward, hand extended. I am Henrik Ostergren, Secretary of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. On behalf of His Majesty the King and the Nobel Foundation, welcome to Sweden. The flowers were presented to Amara, and Henrik continued, we have arranged a direct path through diplomatic channels. Your luggage will be collected and delivered to the Grand Hotel. Please, follow me. As they were escorted through the terminal, bypassing standard customs and immigration procedures, Amara noticed how staff and travelers alike regarded them with expressions of recognition and respect. No suspicious glances. No invasive questions. Just deference and admiration. Your work on sickle cell gene therapy has generated tremendous excitement here, Henrik explained as they walked. Sweden has a growing African immigrant population, and many families affected by the condition see your research as nothing short of miraculous. They were led to a sleek black car with the Nobel Foundation insignia on the door. As they settled into the plush leather seats, a woman in the front passenger seat turned to introduce herself. I'm Astrid Bergman, from Swedish National Television. We'd like to conduct a brief interview about your groundbreaking treatment, if you're not too tired from your journey. The interview began professionally enough, with questions about their research methodology and the potential global impact of their therapy. But then Astrid shifted direction. A video has been circulating online showing your treatment by American airport security. Would you care to comment on that incident? The question hung in the air. The Jacksons had discussed how to handle media inquiries about the TSA confrontation, agreeing to focus on their research rather than personal experiences of discrimination. But now, with the video spreading globally, complete avoidance seemed impossible. We prefer to focus on the scientific achievement that brings us to Stockholm, Amara began diplomatically. Of course, Astrid nodded, but many viewers are shocked by the contrast. Scientists traveling to accept humanity's highest honor being treated with such disrespect in their home country. Do you believe your race played a factor in this treatment? Have you ever been judged based on your appearance before others knew your accomplishments? Type number 1 in the comments if you've experienced prejudice like the Jacksons, and hit that like button to support their incredible journey. Subscribe to follow more stories of remarkable individuals overcoming discrimination. Would the TSA agents have treated these Nobel laureates differently if they'd known who they were? Let's see what happened when they reached their hotel. Malik took a measured breath before responding. Throughout our careers, we've faced numerous barriers related to our identity. This incident is unfortunately consistent with the experiences of many Black Americans, regardless of their credentials. We're scientists first, Amara added. We believe in evidence. The evidence of systemic bias in America is overwhelming. But so is the evidence that our treatment will save millions of lives affected by sickle cell disease. We choose to focus our energy there. Their measured response struck the perfect balance, acknowledging the reality without allowing it to overshadow their achievement. By the time they reached the Grand Hotel Stockholm, their interview had already been transmitted and was generating significant discussion online. The hotel staff greeted them with efficiency and warmth. Their suite overlooked the waterfront, with the royal palace visible in the distance. On the dining table waited a welcome basket of Swedish delicacies, along with a handwritten note from the Nobel Committee chairperson. Just as they began to unpack, Malik's phone rang with an international number. Dr. Jackson speaking, he answered. Dr. Jackson, this is Catherine Weaver from the U.S. State Department. The voice was clipped, professional. I'm calling regarding the incident at Atlanta International Airport that has been circulating online. Yes. Malik put the call on speaker so Amara could hear. The department wishes to express regret for any inconvenience you experienced. We want to assure you that the United States values scientific achievement and, Ms. Weaver, Malik interrupted politely but firmly, what happened wasn't an inconvenience. It was discriminatory treatment based on our race, something many Americans experience daily without the privilege of having it recorded or trending online. A pause. The department is taking the matter seriously. The secretary would appreciate if you could refrain from further public comments that might be interpreted as critical of American institutions during this prestigious international event. Amara couldn't remain silent. We're scientists, Ms. Weaver. We deal in facts, not convenient narratives. The fact is, we were humiliated for wearing traditional African attire while traveling to accept the Nobel Prize. No amount of diplomatic language changes that reality. After ending the call, they had just enough time to shower and change before meeting other laureates for an informal reception. As they entered the hotel's private dining room, conversations paused momentarily as heads turned in recognition. A distinguished physicist from Japan approached immediately. Dr. and Dr. Jackson, Hiroshi Tanaka. Your work is revolutionary. And may I say, what happened at your airport is absolutely appalling. Please know the scientific community stands with you. Throughout the evening, fellow laureates expressed similar sentiments. What struck the Jacksons most was how their international colleagues seemed unsurprised. As if America's racial dynamics were an acknowledged embarrassment that everyone politely pretended not to notice, like a wealthy uncle with a drinking problem at family gatherings. Later that evening, they were scheduled for a press conference with international media. The questions ranged from technical aspects of their research to the broader implications for global health equity. But inevitably, the conversation turned to the airport incident and what it revealed about American society. Do you believe your treatment as black scientists in America has improved over your careers? Asked a reporter from Le Monde. Amara considered the question carefully. There's a particular burden that comes with being the first, or the only, in predominantly white spaces. We've spent our entire careers carrying that weight, constantly having to prove our legitimacy, our intelligence, our worthiness of being in the room. Science should be objective, Malik added, but scientists are human, with all the biases that entails. Throughout history, those biases have determined which research gets funded, which diseases get studied, which papers get published, and ultimately, which lives are valued. As the press conference concluded, Amara found herself torn between focusing purely on their scientific achievement and using this platform to address broader issues of discrimination. The scientist in her wanted to discuss gene therapies and cellular regeneration. The black woman who had been humiliated at the Atlanta airport wanted to speak truth to power. Back in their suite, they found a message waiting from the U.S. ambassador to Sweden, requesting a private meeting before the award ceremony. Another attempt at damage control, no doubt. Malik sat heavily on the edge of the bed. We wanted this moment to be purely about the science. It was never going to be just about the science, Amara replied softly. Not for us. Not in this world. She opened her laptop to find hundreds of messages from colleagues, former students, and strangers worldwide. Many shared their own stories of discrimination in academic and professional settings. Others expressed how the Jacksons' achievement had inspired them to pursue careers in science despite institutional barriers. Among the messages was one from a young black girl in Atlanta. I want to be like you when I grow up. I have sickle cell disease. Thank you for finding a way to help me. In that moment, Amara realized that the collision of their scientific achievement with America's racial reality wasn't a distraction from their purpose, it was an essential part of their journey and legacy. Stockholm awakened under a blanket of fresh snow, the white landscape contrasting with the deep blue Swedish winter sky. In their hotel suite, Amara and Malik sat with cups of strong coffee, scrolling through the morning's news coverage on their tablets. American morning shows had finally picked up the story, but the framing was telling. While international media focused on the scientific achievement and the disturbing juxtaposition of Nobel laureates facing racial profiling, U.S. coverage took a different angle. Did Nobel winners play the race card? Read one headline. Airport security defenders, they were just doing their job, proclaimed another. A conservative commentator on a major network questioned, why wear unusual clothing if you don't want additional scrutiny? Security is colorblind. Malik set down his tablet with a sigh. Somehow we've become controversial for existing while black. Amara's phone chimed with notifications. The hashtag #RespectDrJackson was trending worldwide, with scientists, celebrities, and ordinary citizens sharing messages of support. Simultaneously, a counternarrative had emerged, with trolls and commentators suggesting they had staged the incident for publicity or were unpatriotic for speaking out. The TSA has issued a statement, Malik noted, reading from his screen. The Transportation Security Administration takes all allegations of discriminatory treatment seriously. We are conducting a thorough investigation of the incident involving Dr. Amara and Dr. Malik Jackson at Atlanta International Airport. TSA is committed to treating all travelers with dignity and respect. A masterpiece of saying nothing, Amara commented dryly. Their contemplation was interrupted by a knock at the door. A hotel staff member delivered a large envelope bearing the royal seal of Sweden. Inside was the formal schedule for the day. Nobel lectures in the morning, a luncheon with the Nobel Committee, and an evening banquet with the Swedish royal family. The Jacksons spent the morning delivering their lectures at Stockholm University's Grand Auditorium. Unlike in American academic settings, where they often had to establish their credentials before being taken seriously, here they were introduced with reverence and received with rapt attention. Amara's portion of the lecture focused on the immunological aspects of their therapy, while Malik detailed the genetic modifications. They concluded with a joint presentation on the global implications for sickle cell patients, emphasizing that medical innovation should serve all of humanity, not just the privileged few. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. At the luncheon following the lectures, they were seated next to Princess Louisa of Sweden, a poised woman in her 40s with unexpected warmth behind her royal reserve. "Your work is extraordinary," she commented, "but I must admit, I've been equally moved by your grace under pressure these past days." As the conversation progressed and they grew more comfortable, the princess lowered her voice. "My children are biracial, their father is from Senegal. They experience challenges, even here in Sweden, even with their royal status. Nothing like what you endured, but enough that your story resonates deeply." This surprising confidence created an instant bond. By dessert, the princess was showing them photos of her children and discussing the complexities of raising black children in predominantly white spaces. "They need to see people like you," she said earnestly. "Brilliant minds who look like them, who've overcome barriers they'll face." After lunch, the Jacksons had a few hours to rest before the evening rehearsal for the award ceremony. As Malik checked emails in their suite, he froze at one particular message. "Amara," he called, his voice tight. "Look at this." The email was from their university provost, with a subject line reading, "Urgent regarding recent publicity." The message was carefully worded but the subtext was clear. Certain donors were uncomfortable with the attention the Jacksons were bringing to racial issues, potentially affecting fundraising efforts. "They want us to issue a joint statement clarifying that we don't believe the TSA incident was racially motivated," Malik summarized incredulously. Before they could discuss further, another email arrived, this one from a colleague at the CDC who had championed their research early on. It contained a link to a scientific blog where Dr. Harrison Wells, a prominent white geneticist, was being interviewed about recent advances in sickle cell treatment. "He's doing it again," Amara whispered, rage building as she read. "He's positioning himself as a key contributor to our research." This wasn't the first time Wells had attempted to attach himself to their breakthrough. 3 years earlier, when their paper was finally accepted for publication, Wells, who had initially dismissed their approach, suddenly claimed to have mentored their work and suggested his lab deserved partial credit. Only meticulous documentation of their independent research had prevented him from successfully co-opting their discovery. "Wait," Malik said suddenly, scrolling through the article. "Look who's quoted supporting his claims, Diana Hayes. The TSA supervisor. What would she know about genetic research?" Malik clicked through several links, connecting dots. "She's not a scientist. She's on the university alumni board, with Wells. They serve on the same committee." The implication was staggering. Was it possible their treatment at the airport hadn't been random but targeted? Had Wells somehow influenced Hayes to humiliate them just as they were receiving international recognition he felt should include him? The theory seemed far-fetched, yet the connections were undeniable. As they pondered this disturbing possibility, Malik's phone rang with news from Atlanta. "Dr. Jackson. This is Bernard Thompson from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. I'm calling because we've been monitoring your situation, and we've learned that the TSA has placed both Russell Whitmore and Diana Hayes on administrative leave pending investigation. This development should have felt like vindication, but instead, it added to their emotional burden. They hadn't sought to have anyone suspended, they had simply wanted to be treated with basic human dignity. As evening approached and they prepared for the rehearsal, another layer of complexity emerged. Their daughter Zuri called from Howard University. "Mom, Dad, there are protests happening at Atlanta Airport. Students from Spelman, Morehouse, and Howard have organized demonstrations against TSA discrimination. They're wearing traditional African attire and carrying signs with your names." The ripples of their experience were spreading far beyond what they could have anticipated. What began as a personal humiliation had catalyzed a broader conversation about discrimination in American institutions. At the ceremony rehearsal, they practiced the formal procession, the acceptance of the medal from the King of Sweden, and the precise protocol for the evening. Throughout it all, Amara found herself drafting and redrafting her acceptance speech in her mind. The standard thank yous and acknowledgments no longer seemed sufficient for the moment they found themselves in. As they returned to their hotel to prepare for the next day's ceremony, Malik's phone buzzed with notifications of threatening messages from nationalist groups back home. Words like traitors, ungrateful, and far worse filled his screen. The Nobel Committee chair, who had accompanied them back to the hotel, noticed Malik's expression darken as he scrolled through his phone. "Is everything all right, Dr. Jackson?" Malik showed him the messages without comment. The chair's face grew grave. "I should inform you that we've increased security for tomorrow's ceremony. We received, concerning communications regarding your safety. Nothing that should prevent the proceedings, but precautions have been taken." This final revelation completed the transformation of what should have been the pinnacle of their professional lives into something far more complex. A moment where their scientific achievement, their racial identity, and America's unresolved tensions had become inextricably intertwined on the world stage. In their suite that night, Amara carefully laid out the traditional attire they would wear to the ceremony, now a statement more powerful than they had originally intended. "Tomorrow," she said with quiet determination, "we will stand before the world not just as scientists, but as black scientists who refuse to be diminished. Our achievement isn't just the therapy we created, it's every barrier we overcame to create it." Malik nodded, taking her hand. "They wanted us to be small. Instead, we'll use this platform to make space for those who come after us." Outside their window, the lights of Stockholm sparkled on the snow, beautiful and serene, a world away from the turmoil their journey had unleashed. Tomorrow would be historic, not just for the medal they would receive, but for the truth they would speak. Dawn broke over Stockholm with a painter's palette of pink and gold streaking across the winter sky. In their hotel suite, Amara stood before the mirror as Malik carefully arranged the intricate head wrap that completed her traditional attire. The Kent cloth gleamed with rich colors and symbolic patterns, wisdom in the golden spirals, strength in the bold black lines, healing in the vibrant reds. Every element told a story of heritage and purpose. "Your grandmother would be proud," Malik said softly, stepping back to admire the full effect. His own outfit complemented hers, a meticulously embroidered agbada in matching colors, the formal attire of West African nobility. Their decision to wear these garments had evolved from a personal choice to honor their ancestry into something more profound, a visual reclamation of dignity after their traditional clothing had been mocked and mishandled at the Atlanta airport. As they made final adjustments, Amara's phone rang. It was their daughter, Zuri. "Mom. Dad. You won't believe what's happening here," Zuri's voice bubbled with excitement. "There are protests at Atlanta International Airport. Hundreds of people wearing traditional clothing from all over Africa, Asia, and indigenous communities. They're carrying signs that say, 'Dignity for all travelers' and 'Nobel ideas, noble people.' Are you there?" Amara asked, concerned. "I organized it," Zuri replied with unmistakable pride. The Black Student Alliance partnered with international student groups across campuses. "It's beautiful, Mom. Peaceful but powerful." A lump formed in Amara's throat. Their daughter had always been an activist at heart, even as she followed their footsteps into biochemistry. "Be careful, sweetheart." "Always am." But this matters. What happened to you isn't just about you. It's about all of us who get treated like we don't belong in our own country. Zuri paused. The ceremony's being broadcast live in the student union tonight. We'll all be watching. Show them who we are. After ending the call, Amara and Malik stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of representation they carried. It wasn't a burden they had asked for, but it was theirs nonetheless. A gentle knock at the door announced their escort. The Nobel ceremonies operated with Swiss precision, each laureate assigned a personal attaché to guide them through the day's complex choreography. Stockholm Concert Hall gleamed with decades of tradition. As they were led through back corridors to the laureates' gathering room, they passed walls lined with photographs of previous winners, Einstein, Curie, Fleming, King, giants whose company they would now join. In the gathering room, other laureates made final preparations, adjusting bow ties and formal wear. The Jacksons' traditional attire drew admiring glances and compliments. "You both look magnificent," said Dr. Tanaka, the physics laureate from Japan. "A perfect statement." The Nobel Committee chairman provided last-minute instructions. "Remember, when His Majesty presents the medal, you bow first, then step forward to receive it. After accepting, step back and bow again before returning to your seat." Amara felt surprisingly calm. Throughout her career, she had endured the nervous anticipation of being judged, in classrooms, laboratories, and conference halls where she was often the only black woman. But today, on humanity's greatest scientific stage, she felt only certainty. They belonged here. Their work had earned this moment. From their position backstage, they could hear the Stockholm Philharmonic Orchestra begin the processional music. One by one, laureates were introduced and escorted onto the stage, met with formal applause from the audience of dignitaries, royalty, and leaders in science and the arts. And now, came the announcer's voice in Swedish and English, the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, awarded jointly to Dr. Amara Jackson and Dr. Malik Jackson, for their discovery and development of genetic therapy for sickle cell disease, a breakthrough that will alleviate suffering for millions worldwide. As they stepped onto the stage, the applause seemed to swell beyond the usual polite acknowledgement. Many in the audience rose to their feet in a spontaneous standing ovation before they had even received their medal. The King of Sweden, dignified in his formal attire, smiled warmly as they approached. They bowed in unison, and he placed the Nobel medal in their hands, solid gold, etched with Alfred Nobel's profile and their names. "Congratulations," he said simply, though his eyes conveyed deeper meaning, recognition of both their scientific achievement and the additional challenges they had overcome. With the medal accepted, it was time for Amara's acceptance speech. She approached the podium, the text she had prepared for weeks now transformed by recent events. As she looked out at the distinguished audience, she also saw beyond them, to Atlanta, to young black scientists watching around the world, to sickle cell patients whose lives would change because two sharecroppers' children had refused to accept the limitations society placed on them. "Your Majesty, distinguished guests, fellow laureates," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "We accept this honor with profound gratitude, not only for ourselves but for generations past and future. Our work stands on the shoulders of countless brilliant minds who never had the opportunity to be recognized as we are today." She outlined the scientific journey, the years of research, the molecular mechanisms of their therapy, the clinical trials demonstrating unprecedented success rates. Sickle cell disease affects primarily those of African, Middle Eastern, and South Asian descent. For too long, conditions that disproportionately impact marginalized communities have received disproportionately less research funding, less academic attention, and less pharmaceutical investment. Our presence on this stage today represents not just scientific progress but moral progress, recognition that all human suffering deserves our collective scientific genius. Her words resonated through the concert hall, met with nods of agreement and another round of applause. The path to this podium has not been without obstacles. As black scientists in America, we have faced barriers both subtle and overt. Yet these challenges strengthened our resolve to create space where none existed, to open doors that future generations might walk through more easily. She paused, considering how directly to address the airport incident that had now become inextricably linked to their Nobel narrative. Diplomacy suggested avoiding controversy. Truth demanded acknowledgement. Recent events have highlighted that credentials and achievements do not shield Black individuals from discrimination. When knowledge of our work reaches the world but recognition of our humanity does not, it reveals how much progress remains to be made. The audience was completely silent now, absorbing every word. But today is not about dwelling on injustice. It is about celebrating the triumph of human ingenuity over disease. It is about honoring the patients who trusted us with their health and their hopes. It is about thanking our daughter, Suri, who inspires us daily with her brilliance and conviction. And it is about expressing our deepest gratitude to our ancestors, whose sacrifices and dreams made this moment possible. As Amara concluded, the applause was thunderous. When Malik joined her for his portion of the acceptance speech, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder before speaking. "I would like to add my thanks to those already expressed by my brilliant wife and research partner," he began. "I stand here thinking of my grandfather, who died from complications of sickle cell trait. He was a janitor who cleaned university laboratories much like the one where we made our discovery. He could not have imagined that his grandson would one day create a cure for the condition that contributed to his early death, or that this grandson would stand before kings and presidents to be honored for this work." Malik's voice grew stronger as he continued. "Yet I believe he would recognize that our journey reflects an American paradox, a nation capable of producing path-breaking innovation while still struggling to fully recognize the humanity of all its citizens. Today, we celebrate not just what America is, but what it can become when all its talent is nurtured and respected." The ceremony continued with presentations to laureates in other fields, but the Jacksons' words had clearly struck a chord that resonated throughout the hall. Even the U.S. ambassador, seated in a place of honor, appeared uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and consulting frequently with an aide. Following the formal ceremony came a banquet at the Stockholm City Hall, where laureates dined with royalty and dignitaries at tables adorned with thousands of flowers. The Jacksons found themselves seated with Nobel Committee members and prominent Swedish scientists, all eager to discuss both their research and their perspective on American race relations. Throughout the evening, they noticed other American scientists approaching to express private support, though few had spoken publicly about the airport incident. "What happened to you was shameful," whispered a prominent cardiologist from Johns Hopkins. "Many of us stand with you, even if we haven't said so loudly enough." It was a bittersweet revelation, solidarity offered in whispers rather than declared in the open. Yet it also represented progress. Conversations that would have been avoided entirely a generation earlier were at least happening now, even if sometimes in hushed tones. As the evening drew to a close, Amara and Malik found a quiet moment alone on a balcony overlooking Stockholm's twinkling lights. They held their Nobel medal between them, the tangible symbol of a journey neither could have imagined when they first met as undergraduate research assistants. "We did it," Amara said softly. "Not just the science, but this moment. Standing in our truth. Honoring our heritage. Refusing to be diminished." Malik nodded, his eyes reflecting both triumph and the weight of responsibility. "This isn't just our victory. It belongs to everyone who came before us, everyone who supported us, and everyone who will come after." "And tomorrow?" Amara asked. "The world is watching now. What do we do with this platform?" Malik squeezed her hand. "What we've always done. Speak truth. Do good science. Make space for others." As they rejoined the celebration, they carried with them not just the prestigious medal but the knowledge that their words and presence on that stage had already begun to change conversations around the world. Their scientific breakthrough would save millions of lives, and perhaps their courage in this moment would help reshape the world those lives were lived in. The morning after the ceremony, Stockholm's weak winter sun barely penetrated the heavy drapes of the Jacksons' hotel suite. Amara woke first, reaching for her phone out of habit. The screen illuminated with hundreds of notifications, messages, emails, social media alerts, missed calls. The tally was overwhelming, over 700 communications since they'd gone to sleep. She sat up, scrolling through the flood of information. The messages fell into clear categories. Congratulations from colleagues and friends, interview requests from media outlets worldwide, expressions of gratitude from sickle cell patients and their families, and death threats. "Malik," she said, her voice tight. "Wake up." He stirred beside her, immediately alert at her tone. "What is it?" She handed him her phone, open to an email with the subject line, "Race traitors die." The message contained explicit threats against them and their daughter, accompanied by their home address and Zuri's dorm information. "There are dozens like this," Amara said quietly. "Some sent to my university email, others through social media." Malik's jaw tightened as he scrolled through more messages. "We need to call Zuri, make sure she's safe. Then campus security at Howard. Then our home security system." As they made these urgent calls, Malik's tablet chimed with a news alert. The TSA agent from Atlanta, Russell Whitmore, had given an exclusive interview to a conservative news outlet. "I was just doing my job," Russell insisted in the video clip. "These people came through with unusual clothing that required additional screening. Instead of complying respectfully, they made it about race. Now I'm suspended without pay while they're being treated like heroes for playing the victim card." The interviewer nodded sympathetically. "So you had no idea they were Nobel Prize winners?" "Of course not. And it wouldn't have mattered if they were the president. Security procedures apply to everyone." Russell leaned forward, his expression self-righteous. "But I have to ask, if they're so proud of their heritage, why are they so offended when that heritage requires additional security checks? It's almost like they wanted to create an incident." The deliberate mischaracterization was infuriating. The Jacksons had never suggested they should receive special treatment, only the basic dignity afforded to any traveler. As they continued monitoring the unfolding situation, the division in responses became stark. International media largely portrayed them as distinguished scientists who had endured racist treatment, while many American outlets, particularly conservative ones, framed them as ungrateful complainers who had embarrassed the United States on the world stage. "Ungrateful scientists slam America while accepting foreign prize," read one headline. "Jacksons use Nobel platform to attack US," proclaimed another. A pundit on a morning show argued, if they hate America so much, perhaps they should have stayed in Sweden. Amara sighed heavily. The predictable playbook. Criticize any aspect of American treatment of black citizens, and suddenly you're anti-American. Their phones continued to ring with calls from various organizations. Their university president left a carefully worded message expressing concerns about the controversy, and requesting they call back, to discuss messaging strategy moving forward. Translation: Donors are unhappy, Malik interpreted grimly. The message that most concerned them came from Dr. Marcus Williams, their research institute director. "Several congressional representatives have contacted the university about your federal research grants. There are suggestions of a review of funding allocations. We need to discuss damage control." The implication was clear: their scientific funding could be targeted in retaliation for speaking truth about their experiences. It was the weaponization of research funding, a particularly effective threat against scientists whose work depended on government grants. As they prepared for a video call with their legal team to discuss the threats and potential discrimination lawsuit, Amara noticed her hands trembling slightly. The stress was taking a physical toll. Her blood pressure, normally well controlled, had been elevated since the airport incident. "Maybe we should have just stayed quiet," she whispered, momentarily overwhelmed by the backlash. Malik took her hands in his. "And let them silence us. Let them teach Zuri that dignity should be sacrificed for comfort. That's not who we are." The video call with their attorneys was sobering. While they had strong grounds for a discrimination case against the TSA, pursuing it would mean months or years of additional public scrutiny, depositions, and potential reprisals. "We've been researching Diana Hayes," their lead attorney explained. "This isn't her first incident with minority travelers. We've identified 7 formal complaints filed against her in the past 3 years, all from passengers of color, all dismissed without action." "And her connection to Harrison Wells?" Malik asked. "Confirmed. They served together on the university alumni board and 3 charity committees. We're still investigating whether there was direct communication regarding your travel, but the circumstantial evidence is compelling." As the call continued, one of the junior attorneys unmuted to add, "Dr. and Dr. Jackson, there's breaking news you should know about. Your research institute just received notice of an emergency audit of all federal grant allocations. The timing couldn't be coincidental. It was a warning shot, a demonstration that there would be consequences for speaking out." After ending the call, they sat in silence, the weight of decision pressing on them. Retreat into safer territory and protect their research funding? Or stand firm in their truth and risk professional repercussions? The decision point crystallized when an email arrived from a prominent civil rights organization, Dr. Jackson's. "Your experience has catalyzed a national conversation about ongoing discrimination in American institutions. Hundreds of black scientists, doctors, and professionals have begun sharing similar stories under #ScientificDignity. Your voice matters in this moment. We would be honored to support you however you choose to proceed." Attached were testimonials from black scientists across the country, many describing incidents eerily similar to what the Jacksons had experienced: credentials questioned, research undervalued, presence in professional spaces treated with suspicion or hostility. One account particularly struck them. A young black female geneticist who had been working on sickle cell research wrote, "Watching the Jacksons receive the Nobel Prize while wearing traditional African attire after being mocked for those same clothes showed me I don't have to choose between my heritage and my science. They are both integral to who I am." Amara looked up from the screen, her resolve hardening. "We didn't ask for this platform, but we have it now. What message do we send if we back down?" Malik nodded slowly. "We send the message that speaking truth is too costly. That science can only progress if scientists of color accept discrimination as the price of admission." He shook his head firmly. "I can't teach that to our students. I can't model that for Zuri." Their moment of clarity was interrupted by another call, this time from Zuri. "Mom, Dad, are you watching the news? They're saying your funding might be cut. That's straight-up retaliation." "We're aware, sweetheart," Amara replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "How are things there? Are you safe?" "I'm fine. Campus security has been amazing, and I'm staying with a group of friends. But listen, student organizations across the country are mobilizing. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about every black student who's been told they don't belong in STEM, every researcher whose work on diseases affecting minorities gets sidelined." Zuri's passion was both inspiring and concerning. They were proud of her activism but worried about her becoming a target. "Just promise us you'll be careful," Malik urged. "I will. But promise me you won't back down," Zuri countered. "Not now. Not when people are finally listening." After reassuring their daughter and ending the call, they turned to the question that had been hovering between them since the ceremony: what now? "We have a decision to make," Malik said quietly. "Retreat or advance?" Amara squared her shoulders, the same determination that had carried her through years of research rejection evident in her expression. "When has retreat ever served us well? When has silence ever protected Black Americans from discrimination?" Their path forward was becoming clear. The backlash was intense, but so was the opportunity to create meaningful change. Their scientific breakthrough would save millions of lives. Perhaps their courage in this moment could help reshape the systems those lives were lived within. "If we step back now," Malik reasoned, we reinforce the idea that Black excellence should be quiet, grateful, and unchallenging. Is that the legacy we want to leave? Amara shook her head. Our research is about healing broken cells. Maybe this moment is about beginning to heal a broken system. As evening approached in Stockholm, they reached their decision. They would not be silenced by threats or intimidation. They would use their platform strategically and purposefully to advocate for change. The backlash would likely intensify before it subsided, but they had survived dismissal and discrimination throughout their careers. They would survive this too. Malik drafted an email to their supporters: "We appreciate your concern for our safety and career implications. We have decided to proceed with truth and integrity, addressing both the scientific significance of our work and the systemic issues it has highlighted. We did not choose this spotlight, but we will use it responsibly." As night fell over Stockholm, they prepared for their return to America the following day, knowing they were flying into a storm of their own making, but one that might, eventually, clear the air. Morning light streamed through the windows of the Jacksons' hotel suite as they sat across from Sophia Reynolds, a polished media consultant recommended by several scientific colleagues. With their return to America scheduled for the following day, this meeting represented their last opportunity to develop a cohesive strategy before facing the full force of the backlash in person. First, Sophia began, spreading documents across the coffee table. "Let me be clear about the current situation. You're facing a coordinated attempt to discredit both your scientific work and your character. The strategy is to frame you as playing the race card to detract from your legitimate concerns." She outlined her proposed approach: minimize discussion of the TSA incident, express gratitude for American scientific institutions, and redirect all conversations to their research rather than their treatment. The goal is to defuse the controversy, Sophia explained. Once the news cycle moves on, you can address these issues more subtly through appropriate channels. Amara and Malik exchanged glances, a silent communication honed through decades of partnership. "Ms. Reynolds," Malik began carefully, "we appreciate your expertise, but I think there's a fundamental misalignment in our objectives. We didn't come to Stockholm intending to become symbols in America's ongoing racial reckoning," Amara added. "But circumstances have made us so. Retreating from that responsibility now would betray both our personal integrity and the countless others who experience similar treatment without the privilege of a global platform." Sophia's expression shifted from professional confidence to concern. "With respect, doctors, this approach could have serious consequences for your research funding, your university standing, even your personal safety." "We're aware of the risks," Malik acknowledged. "But there are also risks in silence. What message would we send to young Black scientists if we allow intimidation to dictate our response? Our decision isn't whether to address these issues," Amara clarified. "It's how to do so most effectively." After Sophia departed, professional but clearly disappointed by their rejection of her cautious approach, the Jacksons began crafting their own strategic response. First, they contacted Fatima Rahman, a respected international journalist known for her incisive coverage of both scientific breakthroughs and social justice issues. Unlike the reactionary interviews that had dominated coverage so far, a thoughtful, in-depth conversation would allow them to frame their experience in proper context. "We need to show that this isn't about one incident or two individuals," Malik noted as they prepared talking points. "It's about patterns of behavior that affect countless professionals of color." Their next step was methodically documenting their own experiences of discrimination throughout their careers. From their undergraduate days through their rise in academic medicine, they had encountered countless barriers based on their race. Research proposals questioned more rigorously than those of white colleagues, credentials repeatedly verified, accomplishments attributed to diversity initiatives, rather than merit. "We need evidence, not just anecdotes," Amara insisted, applying her scientific rigor to this new challenge. They spent hours compiling emails, letters, performance reviews, and funding decisions that demonstrated consistent patterns of bias. Particularly damning was the paper trail showing how their sickle cell research had been repeatedly deemed too narrowly focused, by grant committees, despite its potential to help millions worldwide. As they worked, messages continued pouring in from Black scientists across disciplines sharing similar experiences. Dr. Kimberly Thompson, astrophysicist. When I published in Nature, a colleague asked if I was sure I understood my own data. When I presented at conferences, questions always began with, "Have you considered?" As if basic methodological considerations would have escaped me. Dr. James Wilson, neurosurgeon. I was mistaken for janitorial staff in my own department 3 times in 1 month while wearing scrubs with Dr. Wilson embroidered on them. Dr. Layla Washington, chemist. My research on environmental toxins affecting predominantly Black neighborhoods was rejected for funding 11 times before receiving a fraction of the requested amount. A nearly identical proposal from a white colleague studying affluent suburbs was funded on first submission. These testimonials strengthened their resolve. This wasn't just about the Jacksons. It was about systemic barriers that had limited scientific progress and medical advancement by marginalizing brilliant minds based on race. Their phones rang simultaneously, their daughter calling through an encrypted app they had established for secure communication given the threats. "Mom, Dad, something huge just happened," Zuri began without preamble. "Remember how you mentioned Harrison Wells might have influenced that TSA supervisor? I have a friend interning at the university alumni office. She found emails between Wells and Diana Hayes from 3 days before your flight. He specifically mentioned your travel dates and traditional attire. This confirmation of deliberate targeting shifted the landscape dramatically. What had seemed a painful but possibly random instance of discrimination now appeared to be a calculated attempt to humiliate them at the moment of their greatest professional triumph. Forward those emails to our legal team immediately," Malik instructed. "This changes everything." With this new information, they contacted Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the current Nobel Committee chair and a renowned biochemist. After explaining the situation, they proposed an unprecedented joint statement from Nobel laureates addressing scientific racism and its impact on global advancement. The silencing of diverse scientific voices doesn't just harm individuals, Amara explained during the call. It impedes human progress by limiting the perspectives and priorities that shape research. Dr. Chen agreed immediately. Science must confront its biases if it hopes to fulfill its potential. I'll circulate the statement today. By evening, 28 Nobel laureates across disciplines had signed a powerful declaration condemning both the specific treatment of the Jacksons and the broader patterns of exclusion in scientific institutions worldwide. As night fell over Stockholm on their final evening before returning to America, the Jacksons received word that their interview with Fatima Rahman would be broadcast simultaneously across multiple international platforms. Advance excerpts had already triggered preemptive damage control from the TSA, which announced a comprehensive review of screening protocols and implicit bias training initiatives. More significantly, their methodical documentation of discrimination in research funding had caught the attention of several congressional representatives on science committees, who were now calling for hearings on racial equity in federal grant allocations. "This isn't how I imagined spending the week after winning the Nobel Prize," Amara admitted as they prepared for bed. "But maybe it's exactly what needed to happen." Malik nodded thoughtfully. "Our therapy will help millions with sickle cell disease. But if this moment helps dismantle barriers for the next generation of scientists from underrepresented groups, the impact could be even greater." They fell asleep with a sense of purpose that transcended even their groundbreaking research. Tomorrow they would return to face the storm directly, but they would do so with strategic clarity and the strength of growing coalition behind them. The battle ahead would be challenging, but they had transformed from isolated targets into the catalysts for a long overdue reckoning within American scientific institutions. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as they had faced every obstacle in their remarkable journey. The Boeing 787 began its descent toward Atlanta International Airport, the same place where their ordeal had begun less than a week earlier. Amara gazed out the window at the sprawling cityscape below, her emotions a complex mixture of apprehension and determination. "Are you ready for this?" Malik asked quietly, squeezing her hand. As ready as I'll ever be, she replied. Their international flight status and now recognizable names had apparently triggered protocols meant to avoid further international incidents. As the plane taxied to the gate, a flight attendant approached. "Doctor and Dr. Jackson. There will be a representative meeting you at the jet bridge. You'll be escorted through a private customs channel." When they stepped from the aircraft, they were greeted by a solemn-faced woman in a dark suit. "Drs. Jackson, I'm Emily Carter, Deputy Director of TSA Operations for the Southeast Region. We have arranged an expedited entry process for you today." The special treatment was ironic, an attempt to avoid precisely the kind of discriminatory screening that had sparked the controversy. As they were led through empty corridors and private security checkpoints, Amara noted the stark contrast to their previous experience. "This courtesy is appreciated," Malik said diplomatically to Carter, "though we've never asked for special treatment, only the same respect afforded to all travelers." Carter nodded uncomfortably. "Yes, sir. There have been significant policy discussions since your last transit through our facilities." When they finally emerged into the public area of the terminal, they stopped in shock. The arrivals hall was filled with hundreds of people, many wearing traditional clothing from various African cultures. They held signs reading, "Welcome home, Drs. Jackson, Black Excellence," and "Respect is not optional." At the front of the crowd stood their daughter Zuri, beaming with pride. Beside her was Zoe Washington, the young TSA agent who had tried to help them during their initial ordeal. As the crowd caught sight of them, a deafening cheer erupted, followed by rhythmic applause. The Jacksons moved forward slowly, overwhelmed by the show of support. People reached out to touch their hands, offer congratulations, and thank them for their courage. "We didn't organize this," Zuri explained when they reached her, embracing them tightly. "It just happened. People came from across the city, some from other states. Your story touched something deep." As they made their way through the terminal, they noticed something remarkable. Every TSA agent they passed was conspicuously professional and respectful. Near the exit, they spotted a new addition to the security area, a large sign reading, "TSA Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion," with a young black woman in uniform standing nearby. Outside, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Before they could approach, Emily Carter stepped forward once more. "Drs. Jackson, I've been authorized to inform you that Russell Whitmore and Diana Hayes have been terminated from their positions with the TSA, effective immediately. A civil rights investigation has been launched into systemic practices at this facility." The news came as a validation of sorts, though the Jacksons took no pleasure in individuals losing their livelihoods. The problem had always been larger than two people. It was about systems and cultures that enabled and normalized discriminatory treatment. As they prepared to address the waiting media, Malik's phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from their university president. "With great pride, I announce the establishment of the Jackson Fellowship for Underrepresented Scientists in Medical Research. This fully funded program will support 5 promising scholars annually who are pursuing research in genetic medicine, with preference given to those studying conditions affecting marginalized communities. The Board of Trustees has approved an initial endowment of $10 million. Amara read the message over his shoulder, recognizing it for what it was, part genuine recognition, part institutional damage control. Either way, it would create opportunities for scientists who might otherwise be overlooked. The press conference was brief but powerful. Rather than dwelling on past mistreatment, the Jacksons focused on the path forward, both for their groundbreaking treatment and for creating more inclusive scientific institutions. "Our gene therapy for sickle cell disease has been fast-tracked by the FDA and similar agencies worldwide," Amara announced. "Within 2 years, we expect it to be available to patients globally, including in regions with limited medical infrastructure. The treatment requires just one administration and results in complete reversal of symptoms in 94% of patients. This breakthrough wasn't achieved in isolation," Malik added. "It represents the culmination of work by many scientists, including many from African countries where sickle cell disease is prevalent. Going forward, our research team will be expanded to include more voices from affected communities. The questions eventually turned to the airport incident and its aftermath. Rather than avoiding the topic, they addressed it head-on. What happened to us occurs daily to countless travelers who don't have Nobel Prizes or media attention, Amara stated firmly. The changes being implemented must benefit everyone, not just those with recognition or platforms. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of their experience continued spreading outward. The National Science Foundation announced a major initiative specifically targeting sickle cell research, with $200 million in new funding over 5 years. Congressional hearings on racial equity and research funding revealed disturbing patterns of disparity that had persisted for decades, leading to reformed review processes. Perhaps most satisfying was watching former colleagues who had dismissed or minimized their work suddenly claiming to have always supported their research direction. Dr. Harrison Wells, who had attempted to co-opt their discovery and allegedly orchestrated their TSA harassment, found himself increasingly isolated as his connections to Diana Hayes became public knowledge. 1 year after their Nobel Prize ceremony, the Jacksons sat in the auditorium of their university, watching as the first cohort of Jackson Fellows was introduced. 5 brilliant young scientists from diverse backgrounds, each pursuing research that mainstream medicine had historically overlooked. Among them was Jasmine Williams, a young black woman whose family had been affected by sickle cell disease for generations. She had written her thesis on extending the Jacksons' treatment methodology to other genetic blood disorders prevalent in non-European populations. As Jasmine approached the podium to accept her fellowship, Amara noticed she wore a beautiful Kent cloth stole over her formal academic regalia, a subtle but powerful statement of cultural pride in scientific spaces. My research builds on the groundbreaking work of Drs. Amara and Malik Jackson, Jasmine began. But their greater gift to scientists like me was demonstrating that we need not leave our heritage at the laboratory door. Our perspectives, our experiences, and yes, our identities, strengthen our science rather than diminishing it. This powerful story of the Jacksons reminds us that true excellence can't be diminished by prejudice. Their journey teaches us that dignity isn't negotiable, even when facing discrimination. By refusing to minimize their identity while achieving scientific greatness, they created dual legacies, medical breakthroughs and social transformation. Their experience demonstrates how systemic racism persists regardless of credentials, yet also shows how moments of injustice can catalyze positive change when confronted with courage. The Jacksons chose the harder path, standing in their truth rather than seeking comfort in silence. Creating ripple effects that open doors for future generations. Perhaps most importantly, their story illustrates that progress requires both individual bravery and collective action. While the Jacksons spoke truth from the Nobel stage, it took students protesting, colleagues standing in solidarity, and institutions implementing reforms to create lasting change. The ultimate lesson is that authenticity and excellence are not contradictory forces. The same cultural heritage that Russell mocked was integral to the identity of scientists brilliant enough to transform medicine. By bringing their full selves to every space, from research labs to the Nobel ceremony, the Jacksons didn't just advance science, they expanded our understanding of what a scientist can look and be. Have you ever witnessed someone standing up against discrimination even when it would have been easier to stay silent? Has a moment of injustice ever led to positive change in your own life or community? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of resilience and triumph resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who need to hear this message of hope and determination. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. Remember that sometimes our greatest contributions come not just from what we achieve, but from how we transform the path for those who follow.